This is the birthplace of the Bohemian Revolution. From Cowork 591 Studios, this is the Steve Brown Arts Center Podcast Network. Co-host Dale Rueber is on assignment this week. I'm with producer Blake Tempus, and I'm Jim Gillespie. And this is the Jesup News for June 19th, 2023. On today's podcast, we talk to Katie Hund about the Walder House at Cedar Rock near Quasqueton, Iowa. The beautiful house designed by world-renowned architect Frank Lloyd Wright. We talk about winners and losers. We do the 7th segment of Mandino's book on how to be successful. We look at the events inside the Steve Brown Arts Center. We give you the top stories in Jesup. We discuss service and art. And we celebrate the anniversary of my mother, Bernice Gillespie's birthday. The Steve Brown Arts Center is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that has a vision for artists, young and old alike, to have the opportunity to better themselves while helping to build the skills of those around them. It will be offering community programming starting in Jesup before expanding to neighboring communities. Programming will include a community speaker series that will showcase existing creatives who reside within the community, as well as a pop-up series that will spotlight and partner with local businesses to provide opportunities for community engagement. The long-range vision is to house a rural artist residency program for professional and emerging artists in all areas of the arts and the humanities. Artists will be offered accommodations and studio space in exchange for a contribution of labor and maintenance of the building and grounds. Blake, let's start with the winners and losers of the week. For me, the winners of the week are the teachers in Afghanistan educating young women. If you've been watching the news, the Taliban has made it illegal for women or girls to go to school, and there's many teachers, hundreds of teachers throughout the country that are holding school in their homes and buildings all around the country for young women. And so in my mind, Blake, they are the winners of the week. The loser of the week is a Congresswoman from Colorado, a lady by the name of Lauren Boebert. The representative from Colorado said she was boycotting the bill to make sure the U.S. government stayed financially flush, and she said she didn't go to the vote intentionally, but CNN had her on video running up the steps late for the vote. So she is the loser, in my mind, of the week. In library news, the Spice Club at the Jesup Public Library, the June Spice is tagine. Don't forget that is sort of a spice used in chili and other spicier things made both in the winter and summer. The summer story time in the park, don't forget that. June 22nd is Westland of Corn Park, is the Blue Playground. And June 29th is Parker Muncie Pioneer Park near 10th and Church in Ainsworth Street. The summer reading program helps us promote reading of all ages under the theme All Together Now. On the 21st, they're talking about gardening, and on the 28th, they are talking about kindness. Don't forget, there was a lawyer in the library, and I'm sure if you're interested in more information, the ladies in the library can help get you set up with Amy Davis's law firm. The book club is today, on Monday, June 19th at 1 p.m. to discuss the book Hollywood Park by Michael Jolette. Books are available at the JPL. Movie Monday is June 26th. The movie is To Be Determined. Support the Jesup Public Library with Velvet Coffee and the Polar Camel water bottle. Some new things to check out include the STEM activity bags, cookie clutters, puzzles, games, cake pans, and molds. The Dolly Parton Imagination Library. We are excited to bring you, your children, the gift of books. The free service is available for children 0 to 5 years living in the Jesup School District. I saw that California just did that for every child 0 to 5 years old in California. They are giving them 2 books from the Dolly Parton Library. So that is unique. Then don't forget the 1,000 books before kindergarten. You're your child's first teacher. You are your child's first teacher, and your home is where your child begins to learn. When you talk, sing, read, write, and play, you're helping your child get ready to read. Many of you that listen knew my mother, Bernice Gillespie, and June 19th would be the celebration of her birthday. She lived most of her life near Cresco, Iowa, or in Cresco, Iowa, and the last part of her life, she lived in Jesup, Iowa, and got to know many of you. She was an amazing woman, and many of our listeners talk about my mother to me quite often. My mother taught me to face adversity with strength and determination matched by few. Even when she had bad health, she found ways to battle and continued to amaze me. One way was her love to work outside in the yard. As she got older and faced her first stroke, she had me purchase a riding lawnmower so she could continue to care for the yard. Although several people would beg to differ, she claimed to always have the most beautiful yard in Jesup or Cresco. I know my mom would want me to tell you that she cared for many of you deeply. She relished her role as aunt and all of you as all of her brothers and sisters passed away, she understood and fulfilled her role as a matriarch in the Benson family. Although she was unable to always come and see her nieces and nephews and her extended family, she loved them very much, and many of those would come and see her as she played the role of matriarch and the last remaining Benson of that era. She was not limited to blood family either, as every Wednesday and every Sunday she would scour the Waterloo box scores to see how her boys' teams were doing. She would looking for Roger scored Egco, Virgil scored Dunkerton, Tim scored Jesup, or Steve scored Fredericksburg. If any of them would call, Mom would always ask how they thought things were going for them, and if any of them took things too seriously, she would always remind me that they would all face tougher challenges in their life than to lose a basketball game. My mother was one of the most competitive women I've ever been around, most competitive humans I've ever been around. In the words of Richard Bach from the book Illusions, don't be dismayed at goodbyes. A farewell is necessary before we can meet again. And meeting again after moments or lifetimes is certain for those who are family and friends. At Co-work, today, the 19th of June, Come and Get It, the food truck, Come and Get It is here. Then tomorrow, the 20th, Foods Here Mobile is here from 10:30 to 1:30. On the 23rd, Co-work is sponsoring Simply Amy Boutique Mobile event from 2 until 6. This week is quite full at Co-work 591. Stop by and see Kelly for information on Co-work. Probably one of the best kept secrets in our area. It's a great place, and they are kind enough to let us use their studio weekly to do our podcast out of here. In White's funeral home obituaries this week. From Gilbertville, Arlene M. Shares died at Unity Point Allen Memorial Hospital in Waterloo, Iowa. Arlene was born near Gladbrook in Tama County, Iowa on November 25th, 1934, the daughter of Ernest Carl Lidke and Alice Margaret Brown Lidke. On January 8th, 1955, she was united in marriage to Adam Lewis Shares at St. Mary's Catholic Church in Waterloo. Arlene was a homemaker, but always worked part-time in the American Legion in Gilbertville and other local businesses. She was a member of the Immaculate Conception Catholic Church and Catholic Order of Foresters in Gilbertville. She especially enjoyed her flower gardens and hanging out with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Arlene is survived by one son, Terry Shares, three daughters, Brenda Dudley, Jolie Becker, Renee Weber, all of Gilbertville, 9 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren, and one brother, Norman Lickey of Waterloo. She was preceded in death by her husband, Adam, her parents, 6 brothers, Bob, Wilbur, Royal, Warren, Jim, and Ron, and 3 sisters, Doris Osgard, Gertrude Conley, and an infant sister, Esther Lickey. White Funeral Home of Jesup assisted the family with arrangement. Jesup news, as the summer roars on and we are getting close to Farmers Day. Dale usually provides us with updates on Farmers Day. We have a few things. They had the inflatable rocket up for the burnout here this 2 weekends ago. And don't forget that on July 6th, they are going to have multiple inflatables up before the carnival comes to town. On July 7th and 8th, the carnival will be in town. This year's Grand Marshal is Alan Wright, and they are trying to get Alan in the Guinness Book of World Records for longest serving bus driver, over 65 years. They are also going to have a moon rock dig out in the park area. Remember, the Chamber is having a pork burger cook on the 6th from 11:30 till noon. And also 3 ambassadors for NASA will be coming to talk about the moon rocks, etc., and talk about NASA. So that is exciting. As far as the city news, they are still working to finalize the building of single-family dwellings on the southwest part of Jesup, and so if you have the opportunity to talk to board members or city council members, you can talk to Denny Bell, Curtis Shares, Dave Bishop, Craig Wright, and Todd Rolfson about that. As I was getting ready for tonight's show, I came across a story that I'd forgot about. There was a marathon December of, I believe it was 2019. I may be wrong, right in there. And the winner was a man by the name of Abel Kiprop Mute from Kenya. You know, the Kenyans always have extraordinary distance runners. Well, in this particular marathon, they were finishing the race, and Mutai was coming to an end. And many times, for a long distance race, the end can be confusing. And Mute got confused and thought he had finished the race. And there was a Spaniard by the name of Ivan Fernandez Anaya that came charging up behind, and Mute was not across the finish line. And it stopped running. And Anaya could have went by him and won the race. Anaya stopped, put his arm on Mute's shoulder and pointed out the finish line and said, you in Spanish, you have not finished the race. You have not finished the race. Well, Mute did not understand Spanish. And finally, with guiding gestures and pointing and a little prodding, Anaya got Mute across the finish line and let Mute win the race. And he was asked after the race, well, you could have won the race, Anaya. Why would you do that? And to Anaya's great credit, he said, I didn't win the race. Mute won the race. And if I would have run the race, I wouldn't have really won the race. And so he stayed behind Mute and allowed him to win the race, to his credit. This was in December of 2019. And an incredible act of sportsmanship. This is culture, people. This is something that the Steve Brown Arts Center believes in is culture and sportsmanship and supports doing the right thing. The last thing we want to talk about before we wrap up the show is Chapter 7 of Og Mandino's 10 Steps to Success. The 7th step is I will laugh at the world. This perhaps is the best one. Now, Mandino is not talking about going out and ridiculing people. He is saying take things with a grain of salt. Understand that everything is not personal. And this is a great paragraph from there. As from the step, I will laugh at the world. Henceforth will I shed only tears of sweat, for those of sadness or remorse or frustration are of no valuable in the marketplace, whilst each smile can be exchanged for gold, and each kind word spoken from my heart can build a castle. Don't be afraid, people, to be happy. It can change the world. Smiles can change the world, people. I will laugh at the world. This is the Steve Brown Arts Center Podcast Network. What if I were to tell you that we have a piece of art that is so valuable that it would be like Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa within 20 miles of us, and it's almost secretive in Buchanan County and the surrounding areas. It's not for lack of trying. It's people, and we've talked about this, it's from people don't visit things in their own backyard. But tonight we have the manager of that piece of art, Katie Hund. She manages Cedar Rock outside of Quasqueton. And welcome, Katie.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Katie, how long have you been at Cedar Rock, and what's your job there?
I have worked at Cedar Rock. I started seasonally when I was in college in 2005. Became full-time just before I graduated from UNI in 2007. Became manager there in 2013 or 14. And now I manage the park. When I started there, I'd only been to one Frank Lloyd Wright site, which is important because that's the feature of the park, other than the geology, excuse me. And since then, I've been to about 50 public and private Wright sites across the country.
Is there an association of managers? I mean, is it Frank Lloyd Wright managers? something like that out there?
Well, so Cedar Rock is considered a state park. So there's the Iowa state parks that have park managers that I'm affiliated with. In addition to that, because of the national profile of Frank Lloyd Wright's work, I also work with other Frank Lloyd Wright site managers across the country. Mm-hmm. So there's roughly 70 public Frank Lloyd Wright sites across the country, and Cedar Rock is one of those. Iowa has 10 homes done by, or 10 structures done by Frank Lloyd Wright. Cedar Rock, and then 2 in Mason City, the hotel, Park Inn Hotel, and the Stockman House are the only public sites. Everything else in Iowa is still privately owned.
How did Frank Lloyd Wright himself ever get involved in Iowa and in Quasqueton, especially like that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So Frank Lloyd Wright was born in the Midwest in like 1867. Born in Wisconsin, lived near and in Wisconsin the majority of his early life. When he was college age, he dropped out of school and moved to Chicago, worked his way up in a drafting studio, uneducated largely, and became one of the world's greatest architects, right? Worked a lot in Chicago, did work in Iowa and some other places before he ended up traveling abroad for a short time and then coming back to the United States. So he worked primarily at that point out of Taliesin, his home in Wisconsin, and then later extending a campus from Taliesin, which ultimately became an architectural school, into Arizona. In the 40s or the late 30s, Frank Lloyd Wright was commissioned to do Falling Water, which is likely his most commonly recognized structure. Mm-hmm. It's a home he designed for the Kaufman family in Pennsylvania that's built over a waterfall. And he actually, this is later in his life, but he actually did 70% of his commissioned work after Falling Water. So he is responsible for about 530 homes, schools, buildings, churches, different types of buildings across the United States and even into foreign countries. There's a collection of his work in Japan. There's some pieces in Canada, and a piece that was deconstructed in Japan and taken to London and is on exhibit there. So you can see Frank Lloyd Wright in a lot of different places. He came to Iowa several different times throughout his career to work on the 10 different structures he did here. Early in his career, just before he had kind of a scandalous affair, he did his work that was in Mason City. And then later in his life, he came back in the 40s and did a collection of Usonian homes. Cedar Rock is included in that collection.
Okay. How did the Walter family ever get him to do their house?
Yeah. Well, the Walters are kind of a unique couple. Lowell and Agnes are their names. Lowell is local from the Quasqueton area, grew up there, moved to Des Moines to go to college. That's where he met Agnes Nielsen. Together they purchased the Iowa Road Building Company. With that company, they owned the patent on bituminous oil, which earned them a fair amount of money, applying this dust control agent, hardener, sealant to gravel roads, because at that time, like, main streets in Iowa were gravel. So they were doing well with that business and decided to reinvest those profits in Buchanan County and ultimately purchased over several years over 5,000 acres of farmland, which is a serious amount.
Yes, it is.
So they were living in Des Moines at the time in a really modest home. People didn't realize probably that they were very well off and doing a lot of traveling and enjoying life. And they had come to enjoy the arts and Frank Lloyd Wright's work and his architecture. So in 1945, when Lowell and Agnes were looking to retire from their road building business, they commissioned Frank Lloyd Wright, wrote a letter to him, asking him to design kind of a retirement home or an estate for them in the area near Quasqueton. So they had an 11-acre tract there. It wasn't part of that 5,000 acres. That was actually 23 different farms throughout the county. And they wrote this letter to Wright, and the last line of it always gets me. The first page, it says, "In regards to costs, we'd like something nice, but not too extravagant." And Wright responds very succinctly, and he says, "I'll build your home. There'll be no basement nor attic." And that's really where their correspondence started. It was another 5 years before they could move into their home after that letter was written, but they created a real bond and friendship with Frank Lloyd Wright. I think one thing that was really unique for the property was, Lowell and Agnes could have afforded to retire anywhere, but They wanted to prove that you could build something beautiful in the Midwest, in the
Right.
middle of everywhere, basically. And I think Frank Lloyd Wright really appreciated that vision and that dream, and really went all out on what he designed for the Walters at Cedar Rock.
It's got to be amazing. Do you find yourself each day you go to work, sort of pinching yourself that you are working at a Frank Lloyd Wright? You know, you're working at a piece of art.
Yes, I do. I am so thankful for where I work. You walk into the office, it's in the middle of a park. The birds are singing, the sun's generally shining. You know, you make it to your office, which is in a beautiful spot. You get to talk to people from all over the world. That's pretty amazing and fun on its own. And then take them and share this home with them that they're so excited to see, so thankful that it's protected and restored and cared for. And just, there's something transformational about experiencing a work of art, whether it's on a wall or something you walk through like architecture. And it's really neat to kind of steward these people through this experience. And it's neat to see the worries of their day kind of waste away as they're experiencing the organic style of Wright's architecture and the light and the space.
You talk about Usonian art. Explain that. Explain Usonian art for our listeners. Or
Yeah.
style.
So Frank Lloyd Wright, as an architect, designed several structures, like I said, throughout his career. A lot of his earlier work would be considered prairie style. There are other buildings as well. The prairie style is large and monumental, lots of horizontal lines, very expensive, large pieces of architecture. Basically, after World War II, Wright found that there was an audience of people that would be interested in living in something that was simple and beautifully designed. And that was a niche that he hadn't really kind of explored. So he started working with people that were a little more average, like professors or scientists from a chemical company, or more average people. The Walters were not exactly that, just because of the capacity of their lifestyle. But he created this Usonian style, basically, at this point in his career, where he could design a home that was relatively compact and efficient compared to his earlier prairie style, but still had a lot of beautiful architectural elements to it.
Right.
Oftentimes, he would do the interior design in these as well, as kind of part of the package of the home. And when we think of Frank Lloyd Wright, often we think of him as an architect, not an interior designer, not a graphic designer, which he really was all of those things, and kind of a shameless self-promoter. But when you see these Usonian homes, it's kind of a culmination of his life and his career and his experience in a beautiful way, not always affordably, but in some cases, yes. The Walters was not affordably.
The Usonian home, a lot of natural light in it.
Generally,
Things like that.
designed with lots of glass, lots of light, being able to penetrate the home itself, often with natural building materials. There's a private residence near Cedar Rapids that's literally designed with rock that the family quarried from the yard of the house. The Walters is done with brick, but still has a natural feel. Wright worked with an organic style of architecture, incorporating natural elements and working to incorporate light and create things that kind of looked like they grew from the site. That was his goal.
Okay. You talk about Frank Lloyd Wright. Let's talk about him a little bit. He was an artist more than an architect, don't you? You know, architects.
Oh.
I don't. And tell me if you agree with me on this, Katie. Do you think people see architects as artists as much in our culture, in our society? Because they are. There's no doubt they are.
Right. And I think given the opportunity to be an artist and to design things that aren't necessarily cookie cutter is amazing for an architect. They don't always get that opportunity. A handful of them work their way up to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it's absolutely a form of art to be in a well-designed space.
And do you think before his fame that he was the way that he became at the end? He was well dressed. He was more bohemish at the end of his life. When he built this house, he he had the look of a more advanced bohemian person, well dressed and liking the better things of life, I think.
Oh, yes. Wright as a person was quite a character. I mean, his life was interesting. His mother raised him to be an architect. And when I say that, I mean, she claims that she decorated his nursery with architectural photos and unique styles of architecture. She would try to expose him to that. She had the Rueber block set, which was maplewood blocks that she would use to encourage him to understand the abstraction of architecture and art and design. And when he went to school, then college, dropped out, working for a couple different architects in Chicago before working his way up through Louis Sullivan, who also is an architect who has done some structures in Iowa, mostly Cedar Rapids, closest to us. There's a bank and a hotel there. And he designed very beautifully and acoustically in mind to musical items and things like auditoriums, spaces like that, and also with ornate concrete and terracotta work. And Wright learned a lot of that, I think, through his time with him. He was also, although he wouldn't admit it, heavily influenced by Asian architecture and style, and probably also German styles of architecture as well. Wright, when he went to Japan and worked on the Imperial Hotel there, instead of bringing money home, he brought like 3 carloads of Asian art. So he was a promoter and interested in enjoying arts, and his estate now has a very large collection of Asian art that's worth, way more than he would have imagined at that time. But he was not always the best money manager, but he played the celebrity part well. Also, personally, he would explain that he would live his life with an honest arrogance. And he was an expert level at that.
Let's talk about his wife a little bit. You talked about his wife. She sounds like an interesting person.
Frank Lloyd Wright's wife?
Yes.
Yes. Olga Vanna would be Frank Lloyd Wright's third wife. If you want, I can talk a little bit about what comes before that even. Olga Vanna was his wife, though, while he was working with the Walters and most of his time here in Iowa. So they were married in, I believe, 1928. And the Walters commissioned Wright in 1945. Olga Vanna was an immigrant from Montenegro who came to the United States by way of Paris, France, where she was following this mystic Gurdjieff in a way of life. She and a few people from the Institute for the studies following the Gurdjieff were sent to the U.S. to kind of create a following here, maybe some sort of school here in the U.S. And she, who was 26 years younger than Frank Lloyd Wright, met him while he was married to his second wife, Miriam Noel. And their relationship was a little scandalous, part of Wright's history there. And after Wright and Miriam went through a divorce, Olga Vanna gave birth to Wright's 7th child, Ivana, in 1925, and they were married in 1928. And they were married until the rest of his life, basically. He passed away in 1959, she in 1987 or 5, because she was quite a bit younger than Wright. But during the 30s, she had encouraged, and Wright they were looking for a way to kind of survive, basically, the Depression, I think. So one of the ways they were able to do that when their affair was a little scandalous, money was tight, people weren't necessarily buying architecture, or paying architects, was to create the architectural school, the Taliesin School of Architecture. And that was a way that Frank Lloyd Wright could teach his craft, and she could also kind of impart the Gurdjieffian teachings. So it was a win for both of them. So she did ultimately reach that goal, and she was pretty involved in the school there as well.
Oh, that's interesting. We were talking about mystics before we went on the air a little bit. So tell us about the Friends of Cedar Rock a little bit.
Yeah. So Cedar Rock State Park were managed by the Iowa DNR. Our initial funding source was the Walter Charitable Trust. That still exists from 1982 when the state park became a park. Basically, it was accepted by Governor Ray at the time in Iowa. From that time, the Walter Charitable Trust fully funded everything at Cedar Rock. The staff, the care for the house, reproductions of the fabrics for the house, roofing projects that were hundreds of thousands of dollars, new boilers, all sorts of things. And then expanding the site from 11 acres to what it is now, about 426 acres. The Walter Charitable Trust would fund that, and the DNR would help purchase land and things around the park itself. In about 2009, the park found out that the trust was at a point where it didn't necessarily have the funds that it had in the past to reimburse the state for operations at the park. And the Walter Charitable Trust took some time off from funding the site. They do again now, not to the same capacity they did, but they're also responsible for about a dozen different charitable givings, which is kind of an interesting list. So there's money that goes to the Cemetery Association in Quasqueton, the Walters Church, the Children's Christmas Fund. At Halloween, the kids in Quasky can go to the gas station and get a full-size candy bar from Lola and Agnes. And then each year, 2 students from the local school get a full year's tuition to a state-supported college or university. So the Walter Charitable Trust has been instrumental for the site, but in the years when money from that was a little lean, the Friends of Cedar Rock were formed, and they were created as a nonprofit support group for Cedar Rock. So many of our state parks have friends groups. Some are more active than others, and the Friends of Cedar Rock, their mission is to work for preservation, restoration, and promotion of the site. So though we are largely funded through the state now versus the trust, the Friends of Cedar Rock step up to help guide and manage fundraising campaigns for different projects at the property. So that includes fundraising for, they restored the fountain at the property. They raised a little over $240,000 for restoration of the boathouse there. There was also funds from the Walter Charitable Trust in that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And then their next goal is to raise likely around $300,000 for restoration of the very large retaining wall that is what welcomes you into the property and kind of encircles you into the site, and then do additional tuck pointing for the site. So they are very important for us.
Now, the house is a 3-season house, correct?
Yes.
Could someone live there 4 seasons?
Well, Frank Lloyd Wright was known for pushing the limits of building materials. And there's all the glass, which there's about 1,400 square feet of glass in this house, is single pane glass, which makes winter kind of a challenge.
Yeah.
So the heating is underneath the floor from 1950. He called it gravitational heating, kind of like a 1950 version of radiant heat.
Yep.
So when we winterize over the season now, have these pressure-fitted window covers that go between the windows on the exterior side. It's a piece of insulated board, basically, that we fit on there, and they're the size of the windows, so they're 5 feet by 7 feet. And that's what we do to winterize the house. Also, it's tucked back along the river down this single-width lane because the Walters just had an easement to get back there. And even now can be kind of a challenge to get back there if we have a lot of snow or windy, snowy weather.
Yeah, very, very good. Tell us about visiting the Walter House.
Yeah. So Cedar Rock is open seasonally. Although we're part of a park, you can come walk the trails at any time. We have a lot of people that come use our trails and different things. They're grass back at all times of the year. The house, though, is open for tours from mid-May into mid-October. We offer tours Wednesday through Sunday, each hour from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. We don't require reservations, but I recommend them for people because generally people are traveling from quite a distance to see the house. Because Wright just has that national profile that attracts people from all over. So there are those regularly scheduled tours, and then we have special events as well.
So, speaking of special events, you had 2 this past weekend.
Yes.
Tell us about those.
Well, we had a new special event we were a part of that Michael Mass, one of the naturalists with Buchanan County Conservation, kind of thought up. So it's like Pieces of the Past, which is kind of a century of architecture in Buchanan County. So there were 5 sites selected for this year, our first year. Those include the Independence Underground, so the building underneath the Gedney, which will be the Gedney Bakery that will be opening in Independence soon. So the lower level of Main Street from early Independence days. So that building will be open for it, as well as the Malik Theater. Their entry will be open for that, and they can talk a little bit about their project there. Then the Lee Mansion, also in Independence. Guests will then come, we'll have visited Cedar Rock after that, before ending their structural portion of their tour at the Richardson House at Jakeway. And then they'll all head back to the Allerton Brewery for a nice cold, relaxing beverage to follow. And that's our first, that will have been our first tour of that variety. And it sold out really quickly, so I think it's possible we may end up seeing another version of that in years to come.
Oh, wonderful. And what's the second one?
So annually at Cedar Rock, we host an evening event. The Walters would have an annual picnic at the house, and they would invite the renters from their farmland as a way for the public to kind of come and visit the home and the locals to come and do that. So Strawberry Moon is our version of that, basically. So each year, one night a year, the house is open to the public so they can come and see the house transition from light to dark. And twilight at an architectural site, especially a Wright site, is pretty amazing. So the opportunity with Strawberry Moon, it's loosely a fundraiser for the Friends of Cedar Rock, but it's also an opportunity for the public and the general people from the area to come and celebrate what we have. So the entire property is open, the maids' quarters, the boathouse. We generally have a fire at the council fire. There's light snacks. This year we had a harpist that came from Cedar Falls, and that was funded through a grant from Laces. So it was a unique partnership for us this year. But it's a great venue to hear music at the Walter House. The Walters enjoyed music themselves. They have a Steinway as part of the house, and then a marimba as well. So it's a really neat opportunity to experience the house outside of normal hours.
So was that event sold out or not?
The Pieces of the Past event was sold out. The Strawberry Moon event is just kind of a first come for everybody, free for all, of, I guess I would say.
What time did that start?
This year, 6:30 to 9:30. So it's sunsets around 8:30, I think. So it's a nice opportunity to see it on both ends.
Yeah.
And we generally try to do that each year around the Strawberry Moon. This year we weren't able to because there's a nationally known photographer, Andrew Pelage, who's got the 500 Frank Lloyd Wright project. And he is traveling around the world photographing all the remaining Wright sites. And he had a workshop in Iowa the night of the full moon, the full Strawberry Moon, the June moon. So we had 15 photographers. One was from Iowa. Everyone else was from out of state. So Pennsylvania, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Wisconsin, Illinois. These advanced photographers came and shot the house. And they visited other Wright sites in Iowa for the workshop. And that went so well. There'll be another one of those coming up likely next year.
You have such a wonderful job, and your knowledge of your venue just is incredible, Katie. Is there anything we haven't talked to you about, Katie?
Well, we do have some more events coming up, hosted sometimes with the Friends of Cedar Rock and sometimes just through the park. So the next events that we'll have coming more recent or more forthcoming, I guess I should say, would be the outdoor yoga series. And this is new for us this year. So there's a yoga instructor from Cedar Falls who is connected with the site. And she is working with the Friends of Cedar Rock to do a little fundraiser series of yoga events. So on June 17th, we'll have a morning session from 9 to 11. July 16th, there'll be an afternoon session from 4 to 6. And just before we close for the season, kind of a sunset session on October 14th from 5:30 to 7. that evening. So those will be outdoor yoga events held with a real yoga instructor, Julia Andrini. She does a great job.
Do they need to sign up online, or how do they sign up for that event?
We will have a post on our social media. So they can either contact the park by calling us at 319-934-3572, email cedar_rock@dnr.iowa.gov, or through our social media site. The Friends of Cedar Rock will try to get something on that as well on their website. So friendsofcedarrock.org to sign up for those. And then it's just a donation to attend those events. So it'll be an outdoor yoga series. In addition to that, we'll have a concert series. Those are typically held in September when it's a little cooler in the non-air conditioned house.
Mm-hmm.
And September 10th, we're hosting Luna Nova and the Iowa Composers Forum from 3 to 5 at the house. And then the following weekend, on the 17th, we'll have Matt Andrini and Sean Botkin. And Matt Andrini is a percussionist from UNI. Sean Botkin is a pianist from UNI, and they do a fantastic job. They'll actually play the Steinway. Sean will actually play the Steinway from the house, and he makes beautiful music on it.
Yeah.
So those are ticketed events. Information for that will come out later. They were sold out last year, so it's a small, intimate venue. But I think it's really neat to be able to use the instruments the Walters owned and make music in their space. And, Wright's a little removed from his work with Sullivan, but he still, I think, did a great job designing acoustically.
Have you ever met any of Frank Lloyd Wright's children? He had, what'd you say, 7 children?
He had 7 children. They're all deceased.
They are.
He does have some grandchildren that are, I think... that one just recently passed away. No, I haven't met any of his children. I've met some of the students from his architectural school.
Uh-huh.
And they are very interesting. So their work and their portfolios are really unique. So we have one other event too. I should mention the Afternoon with Frank Lloyd Wright will be a lecture symposium, and that'll be October 7th. So the Friends of Cedar Rock documents some lectures each year. Last year, they hosted Peter Rote, which is a student of Frank Lloyd Wright's, who was hired to do the historical structure report for Cedar Rock. And he talked about his experience doing that and what he learned about the Walter House, which was really impressive. So
you're so fortunate to be involved in the events there. And Katie, thank you so much for coming in and talking about the Walter House, and we look forward to working with you at the Steve Brown Arts Center in the coming years. So thank you.
Well, fantastic. Thanks so much for having me, and be sure to come and visit. We'd love to have you and anyone listening.
All right. As we proceed toward the end, as we race toward the end, Blake, we need to talk about events that are going on this past week. We had a medium at the Independence Farmers Day that read people's fortunes from tarot cards. We had a nice crowd there. Don't forget, Littleton Free Watermelon Day is Saturday, July 29th, 2023, noon to 8. We were out surveying the grounds today. Chris is kind enough to sponsor his company's kind enough to sponsor tables, chairs, stages, tents, and awnings for us. Don't forget, Belvins and Powers is playing. Chet Reagan music with Mandy McCleary. Bad Habits Band. Artist Bruce Gordon is there. Helen Hunter is there. And Barb Prawl will be there as well. Food vendors include the Jesup Lions Club, the Boyd's Food Truck, and Totally Rolled Ice Cream that was a guest here at the Cowork 591 this past week. Free watermelon will be handed out from 4 to 5 that day. Sponsors include Littleton Lounge LLC, Reyes Concrete, Littleton Chatham Historical Society, Jacobson's Fabrication and Repair LLC, Dream Chaser Acres, Boyd's, Jesup Lions Club, Independence High School FFA, Thomas James LLC, Totally Rolled Ice Cream, Northeast Iowa, Even Events and Rentals LLC, and Derek Repair Shop. And Littleton Tree Watermelon Day is presented by the Steve Brown Arts Center. We have about 25 other days, including Art in the Park, every Thursday from 1 until 2. We're at the Independence Farmers Market most Saturdays from 8 until noon. We're doing StoryCorps events at Farmers Day in the Gazebo. We have a theater camp July 24th, 25th, 26th, and 27th and 28th. And I will talk more about that momentarily. We have a youth talent show in the Land of Corn of Pavilion from 12 until 1:30, August 17th. And so, a little bit about the Attention Theater Kids. That is open for children kindergarten through 8th grade. And it runs July 24th to the 28th. It's run by formerly Heather Rueber of Jesup and her husband. Now, these are professionals, ladies and gentlemen. They are people that this week they are working in a town and they are putting on Mary Poppins. They have to pay for the rights to do certain shows or all shows that they do. They have equipment, supplies, etc. that they have to buy. The cost is $200, but they have scholarships for people that can't afford that $200. It is an event where this would be really good for your children if you get the opportunity. Please, please, please look into that. Kelly has a flyer at Cowork 591, and if you're interested, you can call me at 319-290-0241. That's 319-290-0241, and I will get you more information as well. If you'd like to donate to the Steve Brown Arts Center or have an idea for an event, go to the stevebrownartscenter.org and follow the link. If you have news or would like to sponsor us, email us at jim@stevebrownartscenter.org. That's jim@stevebrownartscenter.org, or call 319-290-0241 and leave a message. Next week, our co-host Dale Rueber will be back, and we've got a little surprise for you as well. Thanks to Blake Tempus, as always, for producing the show tonight. I'm Jim Gillespie. Thanks to the audience for bringing these stray dogs into your day. Remember, each day is about little victories.